Hello and good morning for everyone. Today is class number 5 in Translation 1. And this is Dr. Mahmoud الحرثاني from the Department of English at Al-Aqsa University. I'm happy that we are still on the move in terms of Translation 1, and hopefully you have learned from the 4 classes that we have already offered in this summer course of 2020. The topic today is the translation of idioms. Idioms are very important in English. Sometimes when somebody is asked to do a task, she or he is asked to do it or to write their assignment in idiomatic English. This means that idiomatic English relies on idiomatic discourse, idiomatic behavior. Does this relate to idioms? Yes and no, but this, when you say idiomatic English, this tells you something about the importance of idioms in the language. This is the point I want to stress before delving into the topic of today. The outline that we are going to study is the idioms. After defining them, we talk about 2 groups of idioms, the direct idioms and the indirect idioms. And then, according to Professor Ghazala in his book, Translation, Problems and Solutions, he classifies phrasal verbs to be part of idioms. Okay, although you can argue that they stand as a category on their own right. But we will accept his classification for the time being in order to make it easy for us to study idioms. Direct idioms, idioms that are easy to understand and also easy to translate. Indirect idioms are, in fact, the source of problems in translation, as we will see. Phrasal verbs as well. We will discuss all these together. What is an idiom? An idiom can be subsumed under fixed phrases. And a fixed phrase is a phrase with a special meaning that cannot be understood from the direct surface meaning of its word or its words, nor from their total meaning when taken together. So, you cannot check up the words that constitute or form the idiom. The idiom is usually a phrase, of course, okay? So when you have the word, the phrase tall order, for example, or sitting duck, as in this book, okay? Sitting duck, you cannot say batta jalisa or qa'ida. You have to go and look at the meaning in context. And usually people resort to dictionary of idioms as this. Okay? So it is very important to know that there are fixed phrases that cannot be understood without referring to proper sources. And these are idioms in our case. So you need first to know that there are things you might believe or you might think that by looking them up in ordinary dictionaries, you will sort out the problem. No, you have to go and search for them on specialized dictionaries, such as the Cambridge Dictionary of Idioms. Okay? So it's a special phrase with a special meaning that cannot be understood from the direct surface meaning of its words, nor from the total meaning when taken together. A fixed phrase is also a phrase which always has one single grammatical and lexical form and word order that cannot be changed. You cannot change the lexis. You cannot say sitting pigeons instead of sitting ducks in a sentence like the soldiers were sitting ducks in the battle. Okay? and widow that cannot be changed, interpreted, or reversed. It is one entity that cannot move back or forth. In this sense, both idioms and proverbs are special and fixed phrases. Proverbs and idioms have these common qualities. Okay? We will come to proverbs later, but today we are going to focus on idioms. One of the major translation problems for students is the translation of special fixed phrases, idioms and proverbs in particular. The following discussion tackles the problems of translating them, starting with idioms, as we have mentioned. An idiom, let us define it specifically now. An idiom is a fixed phrase whose form is usually unchangeable and whose meaning is always the same, inflexible. You cannot change it. Metaphorical, there is this sense of metaphor. You say something and mean something else. Okay? This boy is the black sheep of the family. Can you say that this boy is الخروف الأسود في البيت? Let us see. And indirect. For example, hard task can be translated directly into مهام مشاقة. Compare this to tall order, which cannot be translated into أمر طويل or نظام طويل. It should not be translated into this unclear thing. Okay? It should be translated into مهام مشاقة. How did we know that tall order مهام مشاقة? First, the context, your translation of it as نظام طويل doesn't fit in the target context, and also you ought to look it in specialized dictionaries. Okay? The discussion of the translation of English idioms into Arabic can be traced through the following three groups. The groups that are classified by Professor Hassan Ghazala in this book, Translation as Problems and Solutions. The first group is direct idioms. You cannot easily pick it. You can easily pick them. You can easily notice that this is an idiom and it is easy to translate it into Arabic as well. Passing the exam is not a bed of roses. ليس سريرا من الورود. So you can understand immediately that passing the exam is not an easy task. Okay? ليس دربا معبدا بالورود. Okay? النجاح في الامتحان ليس طريقا مفروشا بالورد أو الورود. Back, passing the exam is not a bed of roses. Now, a true friend does not stab in the back. Sometimes what makes the idiom easy to translate is the common cultural aspect. We have this common, the stabbing in the back. In Arabic, we have the concept in Arabic. We have the idea in Arabic. So it is not uneasy to translate a true friend does not stab in the back. الشخص الحقيقي لا يطعن في الظهر. Okay, because the imagery here is common in English and in Arabic. This is why this group is called direct idioms. الصديق الحقيقي لا يطعن في الظهر. You scratch my back and I scratch yours. Scratch يحك. Okay? This means sometimes you help me, I help you. Okay? Or امسك لي وأقطع لك. كل وآكل. This is the common thing between Arabic and English, and this is why this is direct. Okay? He killed his neighbor in cold blood. Yeah, the idiom here is cold blood. Cold blood دم بارد. قتل جاره بدم بارد. Same. أو قتل جاره ببرودة دم. Notably, these idioms are translated directly but should be understood indirectly. Yeah. Indirectly means metaphorically. We meant something, we meant something although we said something else. Okay? That is, they have metaphorical meanings, therefore they are all fixed metaphors saying something to mean something else. To illustrate this further, the intended direct meanings of the previous examples can be as follows. Passing the exam is difficult, not a bed of roses. النجاح في الامتحان أمر صعب. A true friend does not betray. Betray means يخون. الصديق الحقيقي لا يخون. Serve me so that I serve you. Okay? Instead of scratch. اخدمني حتى أخدمك. أو لأخدمك. The problem for the students when they come across these idioms is they sometimes are unable to recognize that this is an idiom. You need to learn, and this comes by experience, by looking at idioms dictionaries, by taking care of every nitty-gritty detail of the text you read. Once you are in doubt, once you suspect that this phrase stands unstable in the text and in your mind, okay, or its meaning is not clear in your mind, then you opt for a dictionary of idioms, okay? The problem for the students is to have access to the equivalent idiom in Arabic. But before that, you have to recognize that this is an idiom. You have to learn, to train yourself that there is abundance of idioms in English language. And here you can talk about idiomatic English. The solution is possibly not difficult for two reasons with these direct idioms, because they are direct, okay? Such idioms are favorable for the students as well as for some teachers. They are frequently used, okay? Therefore, their translation is interesting for both of them. The idioms of this group have direct identical equivalents in Arabic. This is what makes them easy. So if the students translate them directly, they may get many of them right. Now with group B, which is indirect idioms are the idioms that are uneasy first to recognize or extremely difficult to recognize and extremely difficult to translate without knowledge, without referring to specialized dictionaries. Let us take this. Let us talk shop. Yeah, from the face of it, the sentence is easy, okay? Or the sentence is clear. Let us talk shop. Does this mean that we are going to talk about shopping or to talk about our shop, دكانة, okay? So this is the problem with these idioms. They are misleading. They can be so contentious, treacherous waters. مياه خداعة. You can easily taken by these idioms if you are not fully aware of the function of idioms and the tricky nature of them. Okay? دعنا نتحدث عن العمل. What is the relationship between shop and عمل? In English they have the relationship. Okay? It is idiomatic. But in Arabic you have to know it. And you cannot say دعنا نتحدث عن الدكان. Although دكان and عمل can be synonymous, but you cannot talk about the دكان in Arabic. دعنا نتحدث عن العمل. My car is second hand. Second hand. Yeah, you know second hand in English. And when it is said in front of you, you would understand, you would easily realize that they are talking about a used car. But how do you translate it into Arabic? سيارتي يد ثانية. سيارتي مستعملة. This is the right translation. How nice to remember your palmy days. Palm tree, you know palm tree? Palm tree, شجرة النخيل. Can you say ما أجمل أن تتذكر أيامك النخيلية? Yeah, some people would opt for it because النخيل is a sign of happiness, is a sign of giving, sign of abundance and of affluence. Okay? ما أجمل أن تتذكر أيام العز. The bribed clerk was given the sack. Bribed مرتشي. Clerk كاتب. sack كيس. هل نقول الكاتب المرتشي أعطي الكيس? Yeah, this is very difficult. This is more difficult than the second hand and the shop because it is going far into the culture of English. And it doesn't at all have any relationship with any similar concept or idiom in Arabic. Here, you have to be careful not to fall into the trap of translating literally. What is the solution? First, to trigger in your mind that might be an idiom. Check it in the dictionary and you are safe. Okay? So you cannot say that الكاتب أعطي الكيس or منح الكيس. Once you are not clear about the elements of the sentence you are translating, then you can commit all sorts of mistake. Give can be منح. So instead of the negative connotations of the sentence, you might opt for positive connotations in the sentence in Arabic, for example, in your translation. So the bribed clerk was given the sack. He was fired from his job. He was dismissed. He is no longer needed at work. طرد الموظف المرتشي. طوي قيده. كفت يد. These are alternatives offered by Dr. Hassan Ghazala, but we can argue with these choices later on. Okay, but first now I want you to understand. And now sack keys. Okay, but where is keys in Arabic? Where is keys? No keys. أو ظرف أو مظروف أو له. Okay. The examples of this group are quite problematic for the students of translation because they are entirely indirect and cannot be understood from the literal common meaning of the words. You have to look them into dictionaries, but first you need to recognize that this might be a dictionary. And always raise questions about whatever you read. Don't take things for granted, okay? The problem will be clearer for the students when these idioms are translated literally and directly, proving to be wrong, strange, nonsensical, and sometimes funny. So, if you translate the clerk was giving the sack into أعطي الكاتب كيسا in a context where there is no keys, then the strangeness must lead you to reconsider your translational decision. Okay? دعنا نتحدث عن الحانوت. سيارتي يد ثانية. ما أجمل أن تتذكر الأيام النخيلية. أعطي الموظف المرتشي كيسا. Yeah, they can be musical, but they are wrong. Although I like الأيام النخيلية as an alternative, by the way. And we will come to this in translation too. We will play with these dynamics of translation and how you can. We always say translation is about addition to the target culture. It's a bridge between cultures. And how with الأيام النخيلية you can discuss or argue that الأيام النخيلية can stand for the idiom, but سيارتي يد ثانية cannot work. دعنا نتحدث عن الحانوت cannot work. أعطي الموظف المرتشي كيسا cannot work. Simply because they are awkward. They are meaningless, at least in the context of the idiom and its surrounding stretches of language. The solution to the translation of the idioms of group number B is to understand them in context only because they cannot be understood in isolation. In isolation, separate. You cannot understand them separately. That is the reason for having them in full sentences, or in fact full paragraphs. If the context does not help, literal translation of words can be suggested on the condition, provided that it is clearly understood. And the best example of this is polymerase rendered into al-ayam al-nakhiliyya. But you have to be extremely cautious because literal translation, I love literal translation, but not all the time. And I believe literal translation can cover 80% of your translation process because you are not going to translate book into kursi. Yeah, this is literal translation. Or you are not going to translate table into kitab, table tawla, book kitab. Okay? We'll come to this later in translation 2 and advanced translation. If not, it must be wrong, and the students have to resort to special English monolingual. This is why sometimes bilingual dictionaries like Al-Mawrid, like Al-Ma'ani, like even Verso, or even Google, we'll come to digital resources later, cannot help. You have to resort to a monolingual specialized dictionary, like the Cambridge International Dictionary of Idioms, this one. Or an English-Arabic bilingual dictionary of idioms. These are important, as I said, but also the essential source is the monolingual dictionary. That is English dictionary, okay? Now with group C, the phrasal verbs, they are fixed because when the particle is added to the verb, it changes its meaning, totally changes its meaning, as we see, okay? You studied in الثانوية العامة the phrasal verbs like look after. Look after is totally different from look. You cannot say ينظر بعد. Look after يعتني به. Phrasal verbs are well established, extremely popular idioms, especially in American English, by the way. American English uses and overuses phrasal verbs, okay? And they are followed by the British because of power relations. A phrasal verb is a combination of a verb plus an adverb or a preposition, or both an adverb and a preposition, such as up, down, on, off, in, out, over, etc. It has a special idiomatic meaning that cannot be understood from the individual meaning of the verb and the adverb or the preposition taken together. The students face a big problem at translating English verbs into Arabic because they are misleading and usually confused with prepositional verbs, which is a verb plus a preposition, where the verb is taken alone and the preposition is taken alone, and they both giving meanings together, which are not idiomatic and retain their normal direct meaning. The criterion for distinguishing between the two types of verb is to apply direct translation to both of them to find out if meaning is altered. Let us take put. Please put the book on the table. Easy to understand that this is not a phrasal verb. We have put, we have on. On is translated ala, okay? And put is translated into ضع. من فضلك ضع الكتاب على الطاولة. Please put your coat on. Please put your coat on. من فضلك ضع معطفك على. This is a wrong translation. If you translate it literally, this is a wrong translation because put on means to wear. I'm going to stop here because I'm giving a signal, We are going to continue in the next class in the phrasal verbs, and also I am going to refer to this book specifically in the interpreting and the difficulties and the strategies of translating idioms based on Mona Baker's theorization in her book, in other words, this book. Okay? So far, thank you very much, and we will see you in the 6th class, and goodbye for now. مع السلامة.